Hello. Hey, it is Friday, TGIF, right? And so we're going to continue with some reflections on Ecclesiastes, and we're going to talk about Ecclesiastes 3, which is that the seasons that we love to hear about and sing sometimes, right? You know that. So let me start with this, and we're going to get into a little bit into chapter 4 today as part of what we continue out of chapter 3, but we're going to go through that today. Ecclesiastes 3. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What gain have the workers for their toil? I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, He has put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot find what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken away from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before Him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. Moreover, I saw under the sun, that in the place of justice, wickedness was there. And in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there as well. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for He has appointed a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart, with regard to human beings, that God is testing them to show that they are but animals. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans no advantage over the animals. For all is vanity. All go to one place, all are from the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows whether the human spirit goes upward and the spirit of animals goes downward to the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that all should enjoy their work, for that is their lot. Who can bring them to see what will be after them? And now we're in chapter 4. Again I saw all the oppressions that are practiced under the sun. Look, the tears of the oppressed, with no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, with no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead, who had already died, more fortunate than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has not yet been, and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work came from one person's envy of another. This also is vanity and a chasing after wind. Fools hold their hands and consume their own flesh. Better is a handful with quiet than 2 handfuls with toil and a chasing after wind. Again I saw vanity under the sun, the case of solitary individuals, without sons or brothers, yet there is no end to all their toil, and their eyes are never satisfied with riches. For whom am I toiling, they ask, and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. Let's pray. Lord, guide us again today. In our thoughts, in the depths of our hearts, as we consider the words of the teacher, may we find a sense of peace, maybe, that our faith leads us in a different direction. that there is more hope than what we find in these words here, and what it is that we have been given in your Son, in whose name I pray. Amen. And I shouldn't pray that like that. That's kind of setting everything up, right? It's kind of where I am though with this, is that with Ecclesiastes, is that in our faith we don't see everything as just returning to the dust. That there is more. We believe in resurrection, especially in this Easter season as we recount what the appearances of Jesus to the disciples in his body, and so we're not what the teacher was. And again, I would emphasize that resurrection was not a common thought within the life of Judaism at this point in their history. That comes just not too much later, as this is dated, into Isaiah and Daniel and some other places where it's alluded to, but really meets its straight during like that intertestamental time, and became popular during the time of Jesus. That was the idea of a bodily resurrection. And so with this is part of what he's writing, and it is a hopeless life. If you just go into the ground, that's all there is, then what's the point? What are we working for? What are we saving for? So let's go back into this then, and let's look at 3:1 through 8 first. And that's that section about the seasons. And so two ways to see this, and wonder how the teacher has written it. Is he writing it merely within that same context of predestination, universal predestination, that hey, everything is pointless because in the end, rich, poor, man, woman, dog, cat, Roger, whoever, we all end up in the same place, in the dirt. And our breaths are all the same. Or is he writing it and giving us a little bit of chance here, a little bit of free will maybe, that there's this little bit that things can have a moral twist, and there is a point to morality and other things as well. So let's look at this. And so in that first section, when he sets it out, he's talking about there's this order that God has established. And I think we recognize that. We see that we know seasons. Although for us, with the way that the climate appears to be changing around us, the seasons are a little different now, at least in temperatures and the amount of storms and different, whatever the weather people tell us that the major changes are that we're experiencing. Rising sea tides and just sea levels, not sea tides, but rising sea levels, and the way that animals are experiencing different movements, even because of the way their surroundings are changing. Time to be born. He sets it off with a time to be born and a time to die, and then he closes with a time for war and a time to peace, a time to love and a time to hate in that last section there. And so even from the beginning to the end, we end up with born and we end up with peace. But in between are all these patterns to life that we see. Now we can look at this as saying that this is the setting and that we have no part in this. That it's just set this way. That this is how it's going to be regardless of what we do. But I think that what we're learning is that we do have a place. And what we do does affect even the changes in seasons and things that we see here. Okay? A time to plant, to pluck up, time to plant, so harvest. But also then we come back to a time to kill and a time to heal. That in terms of, it's not just a time to kill. We're talking about like capital punishment, I guess is what it would say. And then also a time to heal and do this. But I want to focus on one piece. And it was going down to a time to tear and a time to sow, and a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And I wanted to focus on this because this was the Beth Moore devotion that I had seen, and I wanted to find that again in my notes here. It's talking about when they would rend their garments in mourning, a time to tear, and that as grief progressed and I guess comfort and peace began to come, then it would be time to start sewing it back, stitch by stitch. Paired with that is the time for silence and a time to speak. I mean, talking about people who come to us and comfort. I thought about, with Job's friends. They were good when they were just in silence, but when they started to speak, it wasn't. And we need to pay attention to that. Sometimes there are no words. And I'm thinking particularly of our time now and how the grief process is taking a different track during COVID-19, where people are not able to grieve as they normally do. In terms of the process is thrown off, right? There's no visitations. There's no public funerals. It's just really, it's changed, and it's hard. I thought about Dale. I thought about the young lady who lost her father. It was a student of mine. Others, my neighbors across the street, this high school, passed away, and they can't have a gathering. And so there's just, we see that. I thought about Mr. Porterfield and others that we know in our community over there in Giles side. But it's not easy right now. But that there does come a time when, after the rending, after the tearing, when peace does come, and I just think maybe it's delayed. It's going to be delayed now. It's going to be very different. And so, for us, it's easy then to not. I think now is an easy time to forget people, because we're not in contact. Because not just for them in having the regular way to mourn, the more normal way that we do, and the processes that we go through, the activities that enact and help us with our grief. But we're not able to participate in that same way, and so our pattern of comfort is thrown off as well. And so that's something for us to be mindful of in this time. And so if we're going to participate in the sowing, in that time when we're silent, and then to speak in the words that we need to speak to someone to bring them comfort, it's really different now. Okay, it's really different, and so it's harder, I think, to be more mindful in all of these things that. When he sets it out, the teacher here, Kohelet, does not say that these cycles, these things are just another absurdity. And it's not, you don't find the despair that he has written already about in the first two chapters in these words, in this part here. At least in this section 3, this first section that we read through verse 15. Because everything, he says, there's a signal, there's a certain trust, and there's a dependability to nature and how God plays out against it. And so there's an order to things, and that's comforting. I like order, I like structure. And so now, but a time to keep and a time to throw away. This talks about prudence and providence, like who provides, God provides. But also how we're to take care of that, to keep and throw away. And so we want to discern it's about waste maybe, and how we take care of what we have. That we should put back things. There is a point to putting back stuff for a rainy day. I really believe that those that can, who have been able to, are so much more fortunate, economically right now. We know that through the virus times. But for many people, they don't have that opportunity because they're living paycheck to paycheck. Understand that. And so there is some sense that there is some moral behavior through these that we can enact. Like it's important for us not to waste in the things that we have. Also, I wanted to talk about with the find it. Got to find it. The things that we do with our lives as human beings. That's what it was. There is a time within relationships, for love and peace, and those are the things that we ought to focus on. But if we're looking at things like a time to make war, a time to hate, as these things that are ingrained, that they're set in a cycle, like, okay, that these are, in the sense of that, Kohelet talks about things being preordained, predestined. And he goes later on, like at 3:15, it says, everything that's set in place is set in place, and it's going to happen. So wars, hate. If you go back and read these first 8 verses in that way, then it begins like, well, we're locked in. We can never do away with wars. we can never do away with hate, because God has set it in motion that these things are going to take place. Does that make sense? That this is what that these are predestined, and we can't get out of it. It's just going to happen. But if we look at this from a different way of looking at it, like there is some free will in this. It strikes me that these are just statements that, hey, of fact, there are going to be these things that happen. But it does not absolve us from our toil to not have hate, to work towards peace only, but not to engage war as that. But even in what Koheles says in just a few verses later, it strikes me in a hard way that there is hopelessness in one way of seeing this order. Is this it? Is this the way that God has deemed that our nature, our life as human beings is to play out? These patterns are supposed to be always and forever, and there is no escaping war and hate. We know we're not going to escape grief, mourning. We're not going to do that. There's lovemaking is in here with the Stones and embracing and all that. We know that those are great parts of our lives, and it's something that we need as human beings in relationships with one another. But there is despair here when you come at it from a predestination that this is set. So I don't know how you come out on this. But then I have to remember that we're on this side of resurrection, and that Jesus brings some new stuff into our lives, especially through resurrection, that things can be new. That in Jesus' teachings we are moral agents, and that we have choices. Except that I'm just not as sure anymore how much free will there really is. I said that out loud. I'm not sure, because and it goes back to, I believe people tend to be wired. I just look at what's going on and I say, people are the way they are. And we have to learn to love one another the way we are. So I don't try to be hopeless here, but I'm telling you, Koheles has it in there. But thank goodness this is not all of Scripture. There's a second part to this when he talks about the wickedness that he saw and justice, that things weren't the way they were supposed to be. Things were flipped. In place of justice, there was wickedness. In place of righteousness, there's still wickedness. And that he wonders, then what's the point of this? And so some of the moral agency comes out. And even God's justice. Why does God allow this to happen? Islam is the most predestinarian of all of our religions. And, everything is marked out. Every act, every deed from the beginning. And we speak that way a lot in Christian life. Like, this is what God wanted to happen. This is what God made happen. This is what was written. This is the plan. And every step, it's as if every step of our way is planned out. And I heard that. I hear that a lot. And so I don't go there with this, because that takes out our free will. That is Koheles right there. That is what the writer is talking about. And so we need to be mindful of what we're saying when we talk about, it was God's will. God wanted this to happen, good or bad, right? What we say as righteous or unrighteous. We just got to be careful with that, because there's more to what we're saying. I believe if we can get a hold of it, it's more to what we're saying about God and our own lives in that statement. Saying that we're just like the animals returned to dust. Now again, resurrection. We're resurrection people. We don't believe we've just returned to the dust. But there is this idea that when we look at, and we're going to talk about this on Sunday as well, that, we, in our funerals and the way we speak about things, we say, they're with the Lord, right? Somebody dies. That their spirit goes up. To answer Koheles' question, yes, the spirit goes up, is what we would say. Which is very Greek, Hellenistic thought, but it's really not what Paul talks about either. Because for Paul, it's soul sleep. The bodies go in the ground, and they're there until the trump shall sound. And so, but we've developed this other. We go more with the Greek thought than maybe what the scriptural thought is. Today this you will be with me in paradise, he says to the thief. Well, was that the thief then? Was that bodily as well? That's a tough comment to deal with and to parse. But Jesus comes to the disciples physically in his body, and his mind is he's whole. He's not a vapor. He's not a spirit in heaven and a body here. You know what I mean? It's still Jesus completely. And so those are things that we just have to probably say that's part of the mystery of resurrection and how it all plays out. Because none of us know. We hope. We look at Scripture and try to figure it out, but honestly, we don't know. We die in the hope of resurrection. And so we're not like the animals on the New Testament side of things. We don't see it that way. So it goes along too, so what's the point of all your toil? It keeps hammering that away, all your toil. And I want to wrap this up with one piece of this. And it's in the last verses there. We was talking about the solitary person who's just toiling away, building up their stores and how they're accumulating all their stuff, but there's nobody. They have no one to leave it to, nobody to give to. And it's the idea, though, that we need a cause. Human beings need a cause to work for. Not like Scrooge came to it after Marley's visit, the ghost of Marley's last visit. He said, what's the point of this? I'm doing all this and I don't have anybody to go to leave it to, or to help with what all I have. But that we all need a cause. Even going back to the garden, in both Genesis accounts of creation, one where in Genesis 2, where the man is created first, Adam is first, and then comes plants and animals and all that, things for him to tend. He needs something to do. That's his vocation, to take care of the earth, and that God has put there, and to do it in a way that God approves of. And then even in the first chapter, where we are created in God's image, and then we're given the stewardship of the world to take care of it that way. Our first vocation then, when we go back into Scripture, is to take care of the earth. It's to be good stewards, to live out relationships within the creation, whether they be with humans or with the created order around us and all this, but to do that in a godly way, to be righteous with creation. And I'm not sure that my focus goes that way. I haven't really thought about it a whole lot. I'm pondering a little bit more these days as I look at the earth and think about the earth that we're leaving to people like my grandson now. And I wonder about, is that really true? So I ask myself, what is the cause that I work for, that I'm toiling for? And toiling in this is not my job, but my life. What is my life chasing after? Am I chasing after wind? Or does my life reflect meaning and purpose in the things that I choose to pursue, to work for? And that's what I want to leave you with, is the question, what are you working for? What are you toiling for? Are you chasing after wind? Or is your life bent, your vocation, and you can be a retiree and have a vocation, because there's a group of vocations that God has given us. But what is it that you're working for? All right? Try to answer that. I wish you well. I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to be honest with you. I think we found all we could find in Ecclesiastes, because when you go through the rest of the book, it's not like a lot of moral wisdom here. We have to glean it for ourselves, which may be the exercise that's most important, that we read it and discern and under the guide of the Spirit and figure things out. But every time it comes back to, it's all vanity with it. But we'll decide for ourselves, won't we? God bless. I'll send out an email here about Sunday with the drive-arounds, and it's going to be a good day. Be well. Wish you peace.